Welcome to Paranormal M, where every story is a journey into the unknown. Subscribe and enable notifications to stay on top of our latest paranormal adventures. Let's dive into the eerie together. Are black-eyed children real? So I've known about the black-eyed children creepypasta urban legend, but I may have had an actual encounter with one years ago. This happened in Portland, Oregon. It's around David Douglas High School. I looked up black-eyed children. There have actually been a few encounters and reports of them in Portland back in the 90s, I believe. This encounter happened to me during my high school years, so around 2009 or 2011. Can't remember the exact year, but I want to say I was about 14 at the time, and it was pretty late. It was around maybe 12 or 1 a.m., maybe even a bit later. I believe it was a weekend. My brother and I were up watching South Park. We heard a knocking on our garage window. We had one of the huge windows that covered the front of the house. The curtains were up, but I peeked out of the side and I saw a woman. She looked very pale with black hair. Her eyes were very dark. Now, she very well could have been a tweaker, but the next part creeps me out the most. After knocking on the window, she knocks on the door, asks us to let her in. Me being the person I am, I'm like, hell no. My brother, who was 10 at the time, walks over to the door and says that she's going to let her in. I have to forcibly hold him down until the person leaves. My mom and her boyfriend wake up from hearing me holding down my brother. They ask if, somebody knocked on the door. I tell them what had just happened. One thing I heard is with the black-eyed children encounters, sometimes they will force people to do things with no recollection of them doing it. That's why I bring this up, is that I asked my brother if he remembers the lady, the knocking or trying to let her in, and he always tells me he doesn't. To this day, the experience creeps me out since I've ever first heard of the black-eyed children phenomena. It's because everybody who's had a claim about them has said exactly what I experienced. My niece used to have an evil spirit attached to her. The title speaks for itself. This story takes place back in 2009. It's a few months after my niece was born. To begin with the story, my mom used to own a Ouija board. Keep it around the house, not really sure, but didn't really think much about it growing up. Anyways, one night my brother, sister, her boyfriend, and I decided to play with it. Probably for half an hour that we were asking questions to ghosts, and most of the time I'd mess with my sister and my brother by giving fake answers by guiding our fingers. But after a while I got bored, decided to let them play with it by themselves. This is where it starts to get creepy. My sister and my brother started asking if there was a spirit in the room and guided them to yes. My sister was skeptical because I'd been messing with them for a bit, but my brother told her that he wasn't moving it. A few questions later, my sister asked the spirit what does it want. The spirit starts spelling out a name, and it spells Hayden. That's my niece's name. She then starts crying in the other room. We all check on her, and she's sitting in her crib in the dark crying intensely. After that, they decide to tell the spirit goodbye, close the board, and put it back where we found it. A few years go by, and we moved to an apartment around 2012. My mom still has the Ouija board at this point and has it underneath her bed, but the board is laid out open almost all the time. One day during the summer, my mom's outside in the parking lot, sees Hayden in the window looking down at her, decides to take a picture of her. Behind my niece is a ghostly figure. Nobody, as far as we're aware of, is in the room with her. If I can find the picture, I'll post it in the comments whenever my sister can find it. I asked her earlier today if she still had it. She said she probably does. I don't believe she has a spirit attached to her anymore, since I think the Ouija board got thrown out a few years back. But for those who have read my other post about the black-eyed children, these encounters took place in the same house. Demon Encounter. About 8 or so years ago, when I was around 14, I was laying in my bunk bed on the top bunk. I was on my phone and facing my TV. I saw movement in my peripherals and looked. I looked at a demon. It was a woman. Hard to describe her features because I only looked at her for about a second while frozen before hiding underneath my pillow, screaming for my brother to wake up. Now, what's really weird is this demon was moving her head in a wave-like pattern really fast. It makes me super scared to think about for some reason. When I make the movements with my head, it just sends shivers down my spine. She was moving her head like that so fast, like a figure eight with her head, just moving her head looking at me. What could that movement be? I got some more stories too. This one was my first encounter though, and even sometimes hope I was just seeing things. But let me make this clear. It was very, very real. Made me think I was going to have schizophrenia or something. On that note, last summer, I was working in my office. I fell into this trance-like state, which I do when I see odd things happen. There's been 2 other times I fell into this trance. I saw some weird other dimensional shit. Anyways, I see a flash of light at my feet and I look down and I see a rodent. It was no species on this planet. It looked like a chipmunk, but too small. Not a chipmunk. It was jumping, but not normally. Those high energy arcs of jumping which defied gravity with how fast and powerful the leaps were. I saw the rodent for probably less than a second before it jumped through a wall and disappeared. Went under my desk and jumped and literally disappeared jumping through a wall. Just curious, your thoughts? You can believe me or not, but this is my story. I used to be an atheist as a child, and my parents are both addicts. I was about 10 years old, and my little brother was 9 years old, and my mom had like a bathroom in a room that had a large sink counter and a toilet on one side of the room, and the other side had like a full-size shower and tub, and a closet. I was sitting on my mother's bed with her, and on her flip phone was just ringing in the bathroom counter. So I got up to grab it, and she followed behind me, because she didn't want me answering her phone. Right when I put my hand out to grab her phone, I could read on the screen on the front that my dad or daddy on her phone was calling. And as my hand just went out to grab it, I swear it started levitating about 6 whole inches off the counter. Me and my mother both witnessing this and frozen in shock. Slowly, while the phone's still levitating, it glides all the way across the counter, drops in the toilet. Me and her start freaking out, so my little brother heard the commotion and came in here to check it out. He saw the phone in the toilet, walked past us, went to grab it out. Right when he grabbed it out, the closet door starts pounding. It's like somebody's inside beating on it with 2 fists. My mother, just being a deckhand, always seems to have a pocket knife on her, so she pulled it out of her waistband, opened the blade so she went to open the closet door. All the clothes were swinging in unison. That went on for about 5 seconds, then it stopped. We were all a bit shook up from what we just witnessed. My brother, my mom, and I all just waited on the couch for my dad to get home. When he got home, I don't know if he didn't believe us or if he was just being a dick from being on Xanax. I went in the bathroom and started yelling, "Demon, be gone, or I will throw holy water on you." He's freaking out because he wasn't taking us seriously. But since he yelled, nothing ever happened again in the next 6 years we lived there. That house is bulldozed a lot in Alabama now. Just curious what your thoughts are on this experience. Weird encounter as a kid in the school's old building. I went to a very small countryside school in northern France. My parents had just gotten a divorce. My mom was one of only 3 teachers in that school. Since she worked there, I had to come to school even during summer vacation, at least part of it. I don't remember much about the schedule, but I know we played games outside as well as board games. That was in the old building that was used, and at some point for living teachers. I don't know if that's how you say it in English, but basically the director at some point had quarters in the school. This old building couldn't usually be entered, had barely any lights, and was only used during summer to protect the kids from the heat. That's while they played cards or board games. We could only use the main room. It's the old living room, I think. That's on the ground floor to play. I think there was also an old kitchen and an old washroom. I don't have any memory of those. What interests us here is the floor above. If I'm not mistaken, there was also an attic, but I don't remember it well enough. Let's forget about it and only focus on the first floor. So, not the ground floor. This is the one that could be accessed from the old living room using very, very old stairs. It had a few rooms, an old bedroom, a weird room that was apparently a pigeon loft, very tall with open holes for birds to fly through, lots of places for birds to rest, and another room filled to the brim with shelves. FYI, I only went to that floor twice, never entered the bedroom, only saw the pigeon loft a bit, and only entered the storage room twice. Why? Well, here's where the content actually is. After playing board games for a while with a small number of the children in the room, less than 10, like all children I knew rather well, the only adult in the room had to leave and go outside. I don't remember why, but before leaving, he asked some of us to clean everything and put back the games in the storage room. Only a couple of children had ever gone there. One of them, Alan, I knew pretty well. He lost his parents. He had been adopted not too long ago. I was in his grade until I kind of skipped a grade. We weren't best friends, but sometimes we fought a bit, but we were still pretty close. So we cleaned everything. The four of us followed Alan to the storage room. We were careful, since the floor and stairs are all wooden and all creaked pretty bad. We entered the storage room, and as described before, it was filled to the brim with shelves. There was dust everywhere, and it was badly lit. With like a bird's view, you'd see the room with a few rows of shelves, which you could really only access by going right around each row. The left side was up against the wall of the room. Alan didn't know where all the games had been taken, so we just split and tried to find other games or big empty space on the shelves. Wasn't holding anything, just trying to look for where to put the games. I only remember one thing on those shelves, a big green Halloween mask. You know, Goosebumps haunted mask? Well, kind of like that one. It seemed to ooze from the mouth. It was put on one of the top shelves in the back of the room. I've always been kind of a scaredy cat, so it frightened me. Called another kid who was close, but he got scared as well. The mask seemed to gaze at us and follow us. We heard Alan say that he found the spot to put the games, and we heard the other kid just show them the mask. As soon as they got close to us, the mask rotated to the side and started moving, like behind the shelves to the right side of the room. It wasn't on the shelves, it now seemed to be behind them. Obviously, we all screamed, ran downstairs, told the remaining kids what we saw, keeping an eye on the stairs. The kid that had gone outside came back and laughed at us, still went upstairs to look at it. He soon came back, told us there was nothing, no monster, no mask. I told my mom later, and I reluctantly went up the stairs, and I didn't enter the storage room, but she did tell me that there was nothing. We discussed this with the other kids for a bit, then we stopped. The last weird thing about this story is that when I talked to the other kids about this a few months later, they'd forgotten about this. My mom didn't, though, so it did actually happen. But out of the 5 kids that went to the storage room, it seems I'm the only one who still remembers it. Hate that feeling. Hospital Ghost. Encounter 1, January. While staying at the hospital for a month with my sick child, I experienced several strange events. A sound machine fell off a side table, and a light flickered erratically. But I was the only one who witnessed these occurrences. However, during a time when doctors and nurses were updating us on my daughter's condition, Magnets flew across the room seemingly on their own. Staff saw this happen but seemed puzzled, chose to ignore it. Encounter 2, last month. While sleeping at home, I felt a hand run down my arm and then a poke on my back. My husband was asleep behind me. I initially thought it was just my nerves from sleeping awkwardly, but after falling asleep again, I was abruptly woken by a loud "Mom!" Yet there was no one around when I looked. Encounter 3, yesterday. During a recent hospital visit for a routine checkup, my daughter was asleep during her chemo session. While I was talking to a nurse and looking at photos on the wall, I felt a distinct tug on my sweater. Turned around expecting to see someone. No one was there, and the tugging happened 2 more times. The nurse mentioned stories of a playful ghost that haunts the hospital, known for pranks and keeping doors from opening. Curious if anybody has experienced similar events or has any theories about why these encounters might be happening to me. Any insights or similar experiences would be greatly appreciated. Thought I was alone. Then I thought I wasn't alone. Turns out, I was alone. This happened back in 2003. I work for an architectural firm, and it's pretty common to come to the office on weekends. It's also common to be the only one in the entire building. With coworkers coming and going through the day, the building alarm would kind of beep whenever anybody would come or go, so you would keep track if somebody just got there, or if somebody just left. The company has since moved locations, but this particular office was relatively large, with a gigantic main bullpen of cubicles made of low wooden shelves that doubled as bookshelves, so you could see across the entire office. The other cubicles were sort of laid out side by side, facing the exterior walls of the main floor. I sat in a cubicle facing the south wall, with my back to the bullpen. Each cubicle had a large piece of plexiglass on the floor, so where chairs could easily roll around, and it also made it so that if somebody walked into your cubicle, you could hear and feel their footsteps approaching. Lastly, we had those large old-school computer monitors with glass screens, so if somebody walked by or into your cubicle, you could see their blurry reflection on the screen. I was busy working and thought I'd been alone for over an hour. That's when I noticed the reflection of a figure walking behind me from my right to my left. Never heard the building alarm beep, but I figured maybe I didn't hear it. I was concentrating on my work, maybe. Usually any time like somebody would come into the building, they'd make themselves known to other people there, just as a courtesy. But this time they didn't, so I didn't really bother turning around to see who it was. I figured they would probably come back to say hi in a few minutes after they dropped their stuff off at their desk. Sure enough, about 3 or 4 minutes later, I see the blurry reflection of a figure on my computer monitor. But also, I distinctly hear and feel the footsteps of someone walking on plexiglass coming into my cubicle. I was in a playful mood, so when they were pretty much right behind me, I decided to turn around real fast and say, "Hey, gotcha!" You know, just being silly to whoever this coworker was. As soon as I turned around and said, "Hey," I saw there was no one there. There was absolutely no one else in the entire building as far as I could see. I was alone the whole time. I was instantly overwhelmed with a sense of dread. As fast as I could, I saved my AutoCAD files, shoved my computer down, grabbed my car keys, and walked extremely quickly to the exit door. Since I was apparently by myself, I had to set the alarm before leaving. The building had sensors in it, so if anybody else is still in the building, the alarm would engage. This was to prevent, like, setting the alarm and having it go off and an unsuspecting person still inside. The alarm turned on with no problem, meaning for sure the only person in the building was me. Creeps me out to this day to think about it. Maybe it's only morning. So 3 weeks ago, my grandpa sadly died. We never had a strong relationship, but in the last year we started to build up a stronger connection thanks to my girlfriend. Before he left us, he was hospitalized because of a bad heart attack. The first day me and my girlfriend went to see him, he was happy to see us, but also very worried and afraid that he won't make it to attend our wedding. This detail will connect to what follows, at least I think. The day before his funeral happened two things that was maybe connected to him or maybe just coincidences are as follows. Around 12 o'clock, me, my girlfriend, and my mother were looking for some documents. I said jokingly to cheer my mother up, "Grandpa, if you're here, this is the moment to give us a sign and show us where's this document." Suddenly the TV turned on. Under the TV there were some papers and his journal. I discovered that very day for the first time that he was keeping a journal, by the way, which was helpful. I want to mention that all of us were sitting on the bed while this happened. The remote was on the table, which is on the other side of the room. The second one that I consider the most creepy happened in the evening. We were all in the chapel where they kept my grandma till the next day for the funeral. Around the coffin were a lot of flowers and funeral wreaths. As tradition, everybody gathered around the coffin and started praying. During this ritual, the funeral wreath that me and my girlfriend bought just started shaking. It was violent. Only this one, only ours. Even if it was between all the other ones and only ours was moving. It stopped only when my girlfriend got up to check what was happening. No wind in the room or other clues that something could be moving it. I connect this to the fact that he was afraid of not making it to attend a wedding. Or maybe his just expression of frustration. I don't know. I'm very curious to know your thoughts on this. Maybe it's just mourning in an attempt of our brain to just get the last contact. My experience with a bed ghost. I'm living at the Job Corps Center that was built on an old military base. Yes, people have died here before, and after it became a Job Corps. There are ghosts here. Most are small, but of all the experiences I've had, this one was the worst. I was in bed and it was late at night. I can't remember the exact time. It was somewhere between 1 and 3 a.m. I sleep on my stomach, so I didn't really see this happen. Now, the wall ghosts are pretty common. They knock on the walls. Sometimes they're more active. But that night, they were the most active I've ever heard. They actually woke me up. I didn't think much of it until I heard 3 loud knocks right next to my head. Then something slammed down on the edge of my bed, like someone sitting down really hard. Bed stayed indented like somebody was there. Then it was like that for a good while. Eventually the bed slowly rose back up and immediately turned to look. Roommates were in bed. There were no footsteps, and when I asked them about it the next morning, they were confused and I was horrified. By far the worst ghost experience I've encountered. Very loud screeching sound at window, only heard by me and my cat. When I was maybe 11 or 12, something scary happened. It hasn't happened before or since. We had a visitor over at our place one time, and he was an old man. He was deemed to be a religious scholar in the community. Although a bit of an obscure person, he also had a cat, and this is relevant to what happened that night. My room had an extra bed. This is where he slept that night. I crossed the room with the window between our beds and the bedroom door on the opposite side of the room. But I should add that we lived on the 5th floor of the apartment building. I recall being awoken texting with friends till about maybe 3 a.m. That's when suddenly right above and behind my bed where the window was, there was this loud, piercing scream of sorts that started occurring intermittently. It would last a few minutes, then pause for a few, and this continued well through the night. That was all the way till 6 a.m. Now this kind of sound is something I've never heard in my life before. So loud that I couldn't think. I simply covered my head with a blanket, too scared to move or look behind. Weirdly enough, our guest seemed to be undisturbed in his sleep. At first, I thought it was an auditory hallucination, but the interesting thing is whenever the sound stopped, the cat would cautiously enter the room, staring right at the exact spot above my head where I perceived the sound to be coming from. Then it would just dash out of the room with like the minute the sound started again. And by the way, all this went on all night, and this confirmed to me that, well, whatever was happening was quite real. I tried to research about the sound, guessing it might have been a bat or something, but I'm quite sure that no animal could be capable of making such sounds. The next day I asked around, and nobody in the house other than me and the cat had heard this sound. My instincts told me that this has something to do with our guest. I have no way of confirming it. Ghost Bus. From 1996 to 1999, I lived in a house near a very busy intersection. At that time, I studied at night, so I would get home from school at about 11:30 p.m. Till I had a coffee and something to eat before going to bed, I would talk to my mother. And around midnight, we would hear what seemed to be a tour bus with children passing by the intersection of the nearby avenue, which I mentioned above. However, it didn't make any sense. At least once or twice a week, we would hear that euphoria, which we associated with the tour bus. Our neighbors were a Japanese couple who had lived there much longer than us. My mother, upset with the bus that passed by at midnight, decided to ask them if they had ever heard it. Our neighbor looked scared, told us that 4 years before at that intersection an accident had occurred in which 6 people who were on an illegal bus died. Here in Sao Paulo, Brazil, there was a bus driver strike, and some people would use old vans and buses to make some money. The driver of that bus was on drugs and ran a red light, killing 6 passengers on his bus. Recently went to the newspaper's archives here in the city, such as Folha de Sao Paulo. I indeed find the accident in the archives. As far as I remember, it was in February of 1992. Was it the residual energy that was recorded at the scene of the accident that was heard? The spirit of the school secretary. During the years 1995 and 2005, I worked at a language school. I witnessed events that defy human explanation. I usually say that there are people who have a glow that goes far beyond their physical beauty. There is something about a person that commands respect. People who have a strong presence of spirit. I don't know how to explain it very well. Well, Susan was one of those people. Beautiful girl, curly hair, charming smile. Susanna's smile was the school's calling card when it was first starting out. Always very kind, smiling, and helpful. But in life, not everything is rosy. Susanna met a boy, started dating him, and this boy, who was already a drug user, led her down the same path. She had not worked at the school for 3 years. During that time, she became depressed. Unfortunately, she took her own life. It's incredibly sad when we found out. It's hard to imagine that such a nice girl would attempt to take her own life. However, I can't fail to report that all these things I heard and witnessed. Can't fail to mention that after Susanna's terrible death, at least 4 secretaries who worked at night had their dinner break in the kitchen at the back of the school. 3 reported more than once having felt the presence of someone in the kitchen with them, to the point that some, without the knowledge of the school owner, had dinner in the reception area afraid to go in the kitchen. But the phenomenon that happened to the 4th secretary gives me goosebumps just remembering it. It was the end of the year, the school was already empty. I was with Ingrid at the reception area around 8:30 p.m. Since it was the end of the year, there was a pretty festive atmosphere. Because it was Friday, we collected money and brought some sort of, well, what they're writing here is esfihas. E-S-F-I-H-A-S. Esfihas. The only people at the school were, well, me as the manager, Ingrid as the secretary, Johnny as the pedagogical coordinator, and Wagner, the security guard. Since Ingrid had been sorting the students' report cards, she said that she would have dinner later. At 8:30 p.m., she went down that dark hallway toward the kitchen. It's very important to remember that Ingrid had only been at the school for 6 or 7 months. What had happened to Susanna was a matter that only I and the principal knew about, so nobody else did. But 2 minutes later, I heard the sound of Ingrid's heels running quickly. She opened the door that limited access to that hallway. She was catatonic, terrifyingly scared. I even joked with her, "Ingrid, it's like you saw a ghost." That's when I realized that she'd started to cry, and sobbing, she said to me, "Get my bag from the back. I'm going to leave. I'm not feeling well." I insisted and said, "Wait a minute, I need you to tell me what happened. If the owner of the school calls here and asks for you, what will I say?" Then she calmed down and began to tell me, "Look, I don't know your religion, but I'm a spiritualist. You can laugh all you want at what I'm going to say, but I saw the spirit of a woman in the kitchen." She just burst into tears again. Then I asked her, "Ingrid, could it be a teacher who came to bring a book?" I always asked teachers to return teaching materials at the end of the semester. And it was at that moment that the speaker got goosebumps when Ingrid described the woman that she saw. We don't have any teachers over 1.75 meters tall with curly hair. Where did a new teacher come in? Well, at that moment, I felt compelled to tell Ingrid Susanna's story. That's when we both started to cry, lamenting Susanna's sad ending. I asked the security guard to stay at the reception and went with Ingrid to the principal locker. That was because that was where we kept the photos of past events, and where we probably have a photo of Susanna. Very carefully, so as not to mess up my boss's locker, found the first photo albums from the school's first Halloween parties. Didn't have to look through them very much to find Susanna's photo. When Ingrid saw the photo, she burst into tears again, grabbed her purse, and left sobbing. The following Monday, Ingrid quit her job at school. Never heard from Ingrid again. I need help. Since I was 14 years old, I've had a repeated encounter that only happened specifically on Wednesdays. To start it off, I was laying in bed getting ready to sleep and having this very overwhelming feeling and shooting myself up to sit up. I seen a figure of a man. The next morning, my aunt, who was living with me, told I was screaming uncontrollably before she got downstairs to sleep. That's where then I spent the next 5 days. I braved it and finally went back into my own bedroom. All was fine, thinking that it was just sleep paralysis. But as the next Wednesday came around, I heard voices speaking to me, sounding like my late father. It also sounded like my mother's voice. Sometimes it would give comfort, but it scared the crap out of me. It took a few Wednesdays to realize the pattern after this, but as I was still young, I had school the next day, and I was in a religious education class. That's when I saw the exact same figure walking by the door, and I completely lost it in class. I'm not one to lose my temper or emotions easily, so this had me sent to a room where I spent the whole day. Teachers asking me to draw things and explain, but I could tell no one believed me. Well, I know those rooms. Those were the only 2 encounters with the figure. The voices continued for a year. I learned to cope with it with music or earplugs and eventually just stopped. We went on family vacation to a restaurant my other aunt just wanted to brave, as she's been possessed many years prior here. Whoa. The place felt odd, and, well, it could have just been from knowing that, what she went through. That night the villa was definitely being messed with as doors were shutting and opening and shadows on the walls walking past. I feared we had brought them back with us. This was the last night of the vacation, and only once I got home it started again, and only Wednesdays. Can't tell at this point if ever since the first time I've been so sort of, subconsciously scared it'll happen that it does, or if I'm just genuinely being haunted. The second one. New build ghost. I live in a new building, 2018. It's a 2-story with a half bath under the stairs on the first floor with a hallway leading to the living room where I have a couch. About 2 months ago, I was getting ready for work at around 5:15. Needed to poop. Went to the half bath under the stairs. After a few minutes, I heard rapid footsteps going down the stairs above my head and immediately got grumpy. Now one of my kids were awake. Stood up, opened the door, and I see no one. Okay, it must have been a cat. Sat back down, and after a minute I heard 3 knocks above my head. After a minute, another 3 knocks. Weird. Blew the plumbing. Fast forward to about 2 weeks ago. Woke up at 3 a.m. for work at 6 a.m., so I went downstairs to lay on the couch to read. Something else to bother, don't bother the wife. I wore glasses for distance. I didn't have them on while I laid on the couch to read. After about 30 minutes of reading, so about 3:30 a.m., I heard footsteps descending the stairs. So I put down the book and, again annoyed, thinking it was one of my kids. As I gazed with my nearsighted self, I can drive without lenses, but it's definitely blurry. Toward the base of the stairs, I absolutely saw a blurry figure peer around the corner of the stairs towards me. I sat up and the figure immediately disappeared, seemingly upstairs. Thinking it was one of my kids, I turned the lights on so I could see better. Went upstairs only to find my kids soundly sleeping. Turned the hallway light on after that and glanced at the end of the stairs regularly. Told my wife about this, and she says I was just sleep deprived and couldn't see without my glasses. But I don't know. It's such a new build, though. It's weird that there's any entity. I just saw a shadow out of the corner of my eye upstairs, peeking into my master bedroom. As soon as I looked toward the door, it ran off somewhere. Immediately walked into the hallway and started talking to it, saying that it had no reason to fear us and it realized that we're probably scary. My wife also confirmed that she's seen a shadow figure other than my own experiences. I live in a new build. It's a 2018. It's a 2-story with a half bath under the stairs and the first floor and a hallway leading to the living room where I have a couch. Yes, I remember that. About 2 months ago, I was getting ready for work at 5:15. Needed to poop. A second time, apparently. So I went under the half bath under the stairs for a second time. After a few minutes, I heard rapid footsteps going down the stairs above my head. Immediately got grumpy. Guess one of my kids were awake. Second time. Stood up, opened the door to see no one. Okay, must have been the cat a second time. So I sat back down, and after a minute I heard 3 knocks above my head. For the second time. After a minute, another 3 knocks. Weird. Maybe the plumbing. Fast forward to about 2 weeks ago, but the second time. Woke up at 3 a.m. to work at 6 a.m., so I went downstairs to lay on the couch to read so as not to bother my wife. I wore glasses for distance and didn't have them on while I laid on the couch to read. After about 30 minutes of reading, so about 3:30 a.m., I heard footsteps descending the stairs. So I put down the book again, annoyed, thinking it was one of my kids. As I gazed with my nearsighted self, I can't drive without lenses. Don't forget, this is the second time I'm reminding you guys, he can drive. Went toward the base of the stairs, and I saw this blurry figure appear around the corner of the stairs towards me. I sat up and the figure immediately disappeared, seemingly upstairs. Thinking it was one of my kids, I turned the lights on so I could see better. Went upstairs only to find my kids soundly asleep. I turned the hallway light on after that, glanced at the end of the stairs regularly, told my wife about this, and she says I was sleep deprived and couldn't see without my glasses, that I'd probably repeat what I was going to say on my post and basically say it, well, twice. But I don't know. It's such a new build, though. It's weird there's any entity at all. An actual psychic. So back in 2023, I went on a trip to Waldrug in South Dakota. Waldrug? Okay. While in one of the shops, I found one of those robot fortune tellers that give you a randomized card. The robot was called Pappy. Decided to get a card just for fun. No way this thing could be real, right? But when I got the card, I was shocked to see that it perfectly described my current life, mentioning my disorganized house and unwanted family member, referring to a legal battle I was having with my deadbeat dad. The rest of the card was a prediction of my future. Cut to 2024. I'm at Reptile Gardens, so also in South Dakota. I'm on another trip when I see another Pappy machine. I decided to get another card because of how accurate the first one was. Once again, it was a perfect reading. It mentioned how I see my future as uncertain, a problem I've been dealing with for weeks. Haven't we all? Along with another future prediction. I decided to find the first card, and what do I see? The first prediction was right. A perfect summary of how my life had changed in the past year. Now we get to the scary part. My mom had also gotten a card in 2023, but hadn't looked at it. It sat in her car for a year. Then when I told her about my experience, she finally looked at her card. The card she got was completely inaccurate for her life in 2023, when she received it. But it was 100% a description of her life in 2024 when she looked at it, describing her struggle to balance work and life. If you see Pappy, give him $1. Don't tell me what to do. My brothers and I lost an entire day. My brothers and I were 8, 7, and 4 when this happened. So as such, my youngest brother, who was the 4-year-old at the time, had no recollection of this today, or this day at all. I was 8. I remember most of what happened because I know that, we scared my nan, pop, uncles, and parents more than I've ever seen them scared before or since. You might be asking where the paranormal comes into this. Well, you see, my brother, who was 7 at the time, agrees with me that we weren't gone for more than an hour. Couldn't have, not to mention, they swear to our nan and looked straight at us, even waved to us. She swore up until her death that she never saw us that day. First things first. Some new background. 4 times a year we spend time as a family in a cabin that we own that we call a castle. The castle sits at a man-made dam named Winangala. It's in Australia. My brothers and I always had the same rules to follow growing up, so we couldn't go past the valley at the bottom of the castle or past the hills that the castle sat between. The day this happened, we broke those rules, and on this trip we had our nan and pop, mum, dad, and 2 uncles. At 5 a.m. on the day in question, my brothers and I were dressed, playing Bob the Builder cones and ladders. Nan was complaining about us waking her up and told us to go play, but to be back for breakfast at 7:30. Keep in mind, this was 2004 in the middle of nowhere in Australia. The biggest danger to us was kangaroos or maybe snakes and spiders. Being the big sister, my job was to watch my little brothers, make sure that they were following the rules. For some reason this day we thought it'd be cool to walk past the valley and up the hill on the other side to stand on the top. Watch the sun come up over the water of the dam. I confidently decided that we could watch the sun come up and be back in time for breakfast, especially if we stayed on the road that we all went over the valley that we could be seen from the castle at all times if somebody wanted to look for us. So we set off on our journey. After this, I've no idea what happened. Maybe it's a glitch in the Matrix or time slip or something else. Either way, we made it to the top of the hill and the sun was coming up and everything was great. We were up there no more than 10 minutes. And according to the wristwatch I had on, it was about 6 a.m. So we set off back down the hill, reached the valley. We stopped to look into it for a minute and we can see the bottom clear as day. Decided, as well, most young kids would, to go and venture down the valley, go back up the other side. We have an hour and a half to kill and surely it wouldn't take that long. So off we went. We had to zigzag back and forth to avoid those bushes, loose rocks, and spinifex, or spiky, painful grass, but tried to stay as straight as possible. When we reached the bottom of the valley, I again checked the time. It was roughly 6:15. We looked up the other side, and to our surprise, our Nan was standing on the edge of the valley. She waved down at us. I thought we were going to be yelled at, but she just smiled and walked away. Thought we were in the clear, started on our way back doing as much of the same as we were doing before. We were laughing and talking about whatever kids talk about. That's when we finally made it just right up the valley. Just as we walked out onto the road, Nan just came screaming at us from the castle. She was demanding to know where we had been. I looked at my brothers and back at her before pointing the valley, too scared to speak. Nan pulled us all into a hug and started crying. Started telling us we needed to go into the car so we could go find her pop, parents, and uncles. Apparently, they were all off searching for us. We didn't say anything, we just followed her. It wasn't until we were all seated in the car that, spotted the time in the dash. Apparently it was now 7 p.m. and rather than the sun rising, it was setting. I looked down at my watch and it showed the same time. I remember showing to my 7-year-old brother who was just as confused. February last year, Nan passed, pretty rather unexpectedly. At her funeral, my dad asked if we remembered the day we disappeared. He even sort of joked about if it was him and her uncles, if he beat his last dollar, then he wouldn't have cared. But because we were his precious grandkids, she was beyond terrified. My youngest brother had no clue what we were talking about, but my other brother and I remember. We told Dad that, what had happened from our point of view, and told us that no one had ever had Nan but seen us. Well, that sentence feels backwards. No one, and not even Nan, had seen. Well, that is a terrible sentence. Moving on. He filled us in on the other side of the story, which we never knew. So apparently Mom had gotten up around 6:30. That's when she realizes my brother and I were being too quiet. She looked around the castle and our little hideout, think like a Fort Byers in Stranger Things, with sort of a similar rock and a stick structure to it. She even apparently called out to us with no answer. She then woke everybody up to help her search. Mom then went to the ranger station to get their help in searching, and Dad started to walk around the hills, and Pop took the four-wheeler drive tracks. My uncles offered to check the other cabins, the caravan park, and the boat shed. In reality, they went to the fish and chip in the caravan park and then to the next town over to get ice cream and beer, but they've since stated that they knew that we would turn up, so they really weren't worried. Nan stayed at the castle, and Mom and Dad both swear they looked in the valley and never saw us. Since last year, my brothers and I have been, we've been there to investigate. We've gone down to that valley, and even Dad went. Dad had a look, and none of them can figure out how we've been hidden from sight. Even by some chance, we were hidden from sight somehow, we would have been heard. Our youngest brother said that even when our other brother was down in the valley, he could hear him clear as day. Even if we did somehow end up out of sight and out of hearing range, there's no way it should have taken us all day to walk back up the other side of the valley. We've walked it plenty of times. It's only taken us 30 minutes at most. And who did we see if it wasn't Nan? Because it sure as hell looked like our Nan. Possible shadow figure encounter when I was very young. This happened when I was pretty young, maybe 4 or 5 at the time. We were living in the basement apartment of my grandparents' house. My father's material grandparents lived there before us, but passed long before I was born. I'm not sure who, if anybody, was in the between us, but there's no longer a way to find out. It was getting close to Christmas. I was in the living room watching cartoon specials, and the show's about a shoemaker. There's some elves and sprites who would just come out at night and make those shoes to help them out. Can't remember the name, but I'm pretty sure it's a common story. I went down the hallway into my bedroom to grab a sort of a stuffy to watch TV with, but I froze in the doorway. There in my room were 3 tall cloaked figures moving around and looking at things like they were looking for something specific, like looking at and moving things on my dresser and glancing around the room in general. They had no face. Nothing under the cloaks were visible at all. Just the typical black cloak depiction you see everywhere during Halloween. Needless to say, I didn't go get a stuffy and ran out into the kitchen where my mother was screaming about big black things in my room. That house was creepy. Still get nightmares about it from time to time. We moved out when I was maybe 9 or 10. Another time in the same house, I was lying on the bed trying to sleep. That's when I felt something light touch my leg. Happened a few times in a row, and then it just stopped. I'd be too afraid to look, and I would try my best to ignore it, tell myself it was just a blanket settling over me, and sleep. This happened multiple nights in a row. That was until I finally cracked an eye open and took a peek. There was a hand. It was completely black and shadowy. It was coming from between the wall and my bed. And I honestly don't remember what happened after that, but to this day, nearly 30 years later, I will not have my bed against the wall. I won't touch a wall in any way while sleeping, or have a foot over the confines of the mattress at all. Don't blame you. In the same house, I had a small TV in my room for Saturday morning cartoons. Wanted to watch shows about a tugboat. That TV would turn on and be pretty much static during the night. Just turn it off and put the remote back on the nightstand. Sometimes it would happen again, and the process of turning off would repeat. I had that television until I was 14 or so. After we moved out, it was very difficult to turn it on. Even after a repair guy looked at it and supposedly fixed whatever was wrong with it. You would turn it on via remote or button on the TV itself, and it would just take what feels like forever to come on. It may have only been a minute or so, but it felt like forever. Wanted to watch or catch DBZ before bed. Funny thing is, if you put your ear up to it while waiting for it to come on, and hear this high-pitched noise. Hard to explain, but think of the sound effect often used in an old TV set turning on or off in a cartoon. It was short, and you press the power button just right time during it, the TV would turn on faster. I have a few more stories that would make another post for them. If anybody's good with electronic repair or very knowledgeable about 90s era CRT sets has any idea what's wrong with it, feel free to chime in. It's baffled me for years. I'd love to know what it may have been. It was a GE model, if I remember right. I used to find their logo interesting. I will mention that yes, I know of the old hag, otherwise known as sleep paralysis. I experienced it a couple of times when I was older. And I live in Newfoundland, and we're apparently known to have it occur more frequently in other places. Interesting thing, I read somewhere that Americans who have family immigrated from the NFLD have higher occurrences of the hag as well. Not sure if it's valid, but found it interesting anyways. There's only one explanation to the voice I heard that night. I worked security in 2019 or 2021. One place I was working was a call center. There was 24/7 guards on scene, 2 in the morning, 2 in the afternoon, and 1 overnight. On the overnight shifts, there was no one else in the building. All doors were locked and all ID scanners were locked as well. I need you to understand that there's no one else in the building. There's no way anybody could have been in the building with me. This happened in 2020 when everybody was working from home. The security team were the only people in the building. At every odd hour, I would do a patrol around the building, check into all the rooms I had to swipe in and return back to the desk. Other than that, I'd sit there and watch the cameras and play my Switch. One night while I was there for the overnight shift and the other 2 guards left, I had to go on patrol. The lights in the building were all out. It didn't really matter that much because I could see enough with the lights in the parking lot. I'd never really been afraid to walk around alone. I enjoyed the job. I walked through the downstairs, checked all the exits, made sure they're locked, and all the staircases, made sure they're empty. When I went, and then I moved to the 2nd floor, and I heard one of the phones ringing out among the desks. Not unheard of, but because of the sensitivity of it all, I really aren't allowed to touch the phones except for the front desk ones. I usually played music to walk around, but this time I left my phone in charge of the desk. There's no device on me that could have made a sound. The phone had since stopped ringing and I was still alone. As I moved to the final part of the building for my patrol, I heard a small thud by the stairwell at the back. It didn't bother me, but I heard a female voice call out, "Help me!" I froze, stayed silent, and didn't move for nearly 15 minutes. It took me a while, but I eventually called out and asked if somebody was there. I didn't dare go over there to try and see. I would have heard something or saw someone moving there, but I didn't finish my patrol that hour and just immediately returned to my desk downstairs when the light was on in the lobby. My boss even asked me. When I told him about it, he just nodded like, "Yeah, that happens sometimes." I didn't hear anything else the entire time I worked after that. I even checked the cameras that were in the area. There was no one there. I always used to figure ghosts were real, or wanted to believe that they were, but that night completely proved to me that ghosts are real. When one asks for your help, you probably shouldn't risk yourself. Childhood dream resurfaced. Woman, door, creature. I had this dream when I was about 4 or 5. I guess I blocked it out ever since. Resurfaced because my 5-year-old had done this creepy, playful voice and said, "Don't look at the eyes, don't look at the eyes." Everything just came screaming back. In the dream, I was asleep in my room. I woke up to pitch black. Confused as to why my nightlight wasn't on, I started to panic. "Don't be scared," said the thin woman in a black flowing dress with long, dark brown hair. She was very pretty, carried so much worry in her eyes. "Here, take my hand. Come with me." Took her hand and we walked maybe 2 steps until this giant gothic door appeared. Double doors, if I remember correctly. She said, "We're going inside the doors, okay? But when we get inside, don't look at their eyes. Do not look at their eyes, understand?" I nodded and made sure I had her hand locked in mine. I don't remember the doors opening at all, just that we were on the outside. But almost like a dark realm where everything was dark and misty and tall black leafless trees were there and a breeze. I could feel everything. Her hand, hear the noises, the surrounds, and it was nothing, but everything was evil and dark. Within seconds, she said, "Close your eyes." And I did, and within a second of blinking, "Look at my eyes," it hissed. "Don't you want to see my beautiful yellow eyes?" I held the woman's hand even tighter. "I know you want to look." I've always had very long eyelashes. I believe that I can keep my eyes mostly closed and peek through them. So I did just that. The creature was still trying to lure me to open my eyes and hadn't taken notice that I was peeking through my lashes. I had my head looking slightly down, but had my eyes pointed straight down if it makes it possible to make eye contact. "Open your eyes and look. Look at my beautiful yellow eyes." The woman grabbed my hand tighter and said, "Leave her alone. You mustn't touch her." I didn't hear, what else she had said because I had seen the creature behind my veil of the eyelash. It was crouched down next to my face, and again my chin was tucked to my chest. This thing was just a few inches away. feel its breath on my skin, that black fur, almost an owl-shaped face where its, flat head was. It had big yellow eyes, 2 arms, 2 legs. I could feel its claws ever so lightly touch my long hair. I swear, I'm terrified of flying monkeys and the Wizard of Oz because of this. I start to panic. "Keep calm, stay with me," said the woman. I snapped out of my dream when I heard the fear in her voice. My parents said that I would say they'd talk to me, which caused them to freak out and search my room and window just in case somebody was trying to take me away. They'd said that happened prior to my dream. I never told them about my dream itself. I forgot about my nightlight. Had to sleep with the lights fully on after that dream. Annoyed the hell out of them, but whatever. Weird stuff like paranormal stuff always happens to me, like seeing jackalopes twice. That's another story. This dream coming back to me after a kid saying that freaked me out. Almost believe children are able to get to this dark realm, you know? I worry for my children. I always ask about their dreams in case they need to tell me something odd happened. But so far, nothing.